Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Our current session is about dialects and identity. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand the interrelationship between the two terms, dialect and identity. Well, my dear students, we each have a sense of who we are, where do we belong to. We also have a kind of a sense of what do we want to be. And you know, it is not essential that what we are is exactly what we want to be. So, you know, this being and wanting to be something, there may be a gap between the two. We choose our language to show what we are, and also we choose language to show what we want to be. You know, what we want people to think of us. Not necessarily always that what we are, people should think of us like that. Sometimes we want to look at us from a different lens, from a different perspective, from what we actually are. And for that, we use language as a tool. In fact, we use language, or we choose language from situation to situation, or even from minute to minute and second to second. We make choices how we like to express ourselves. So, you know, this is a continuous process. Well, these choices of language that we make to express ourselves in conversations, in interactions with people, usually these choices are unintentional. They are unintentional, but, you know, they are triggered by a situation or by a place. They also are dependent upon the topic of the conversation, the subject of the conversation, or the nature of the conversation. They also largely depend upon the company. You know, the kind of language I would use with friends would be different from the kind of language that I would use with my colleagues, and it would be different from the language, for example, that I would use in the marketplace. But, you know, when it comes to these choices, of course, these can be unintentional, and of course, at some times they are intentional as well. But apart from this issue of being intentional or unintentional, these choices, of course, are not random. If they are not random, what is the system behind? What is the science behind? What is the sense behind? Well, they are guided by our sense of being. You know, how do I want myself to be identified? What kind of identity I want to have? How do I want people to look at me? How do I want people to think about me? What kind of a person I want to be seen as? So, you know, overall what I would say is that our language choices are shaped by our identity, our ideas of our identity, our concerns about our identity, and our inspirations and aspirations about our identity. This then leads to certain questions. After all, what is this identity? And what is linguistic identity? Well, identity in the layman's sense is the kind of, you know, portrayal that somebody wants to have, or the kind of sense of belonging somebody wants to have. So, for example, I want to have an identity of being an educated woman. For example, I want to have an identity of being a Punjabi. I want to have an identity of being a Pakistani. I want to have an identity, for example, of a Muslim, etc. Now, what is linguistic identity? When this sense of belonging or this sense of identity is translated, you know, into the linguistic choices, and when it is expressed through these linguistic choices, this is what we call linguistic identity. Now, let us think about what do dialects have to do with identity. I hope you are well aware of the terms like regional dialects and social dialects. They are respectively, you know, the divisions of varieties of, you know, codes or dialects based on region or based on the social class system. We also need to think about these dialects in terms of identities because, you know, particular dialect in a particular region or a particular dialect in a particular social class, that is the variety of language used in that social class. It is a matter of choice that is made with reference to the identity perspectives that that particular group or the community of users or speakers have. I would like to share with you, chart that shows what are different kinds of, factors that influence, this language identity idea or that shape our linguistic identity. Well, my dear students, if you look at the screen, in the center, you can see linguistic identity. And this is, surrounded by certain factors that play their role in shaping our linguistic identities. As you can see at the top, family and friends can be of significant importance in determining our linguistic identity. Where do I come from? Which family I belong to? What kind of company and friends do I have? This would determine my linguistic choices and in turn would give me a certain kind of, linguistic identity. There can be other aspects or factors, for example, religion. So, for example, being a Muslim, my linguistic choices would reflect my religion. So, for example, when I start a session, I say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, for example, when I greet somebody, I say Assalamu Alaikum. These all choices, they actually create my linguistic identity, and anybody through my language can make a wise guess to understand that I am a Muslim. Then, there are certain regional contexts as well. Well, when I speak, for example, even Urdu, maybe there are certain words that would tell that I belong to Faisalabad. The Punjabi accent of Faisalabad would color or would reflect in, my Punjabi as I speak it, and even when I speak Urdu, the accent would influence that. So this linguistic identity is the kind of identity where, a smart, listener can very well understand where do I geographically or regionally belong to. Then there is a kind of a professional identity, for example, that I also have. I am a university teacher. I am a teacher in linguistics, so I have a certain kind of identity. Then I am a female teacher, so I make certain language choices and all that. And if I speak to somebody, it is an easy, guess, or it's very, it's very predictable to tell which profession I belong to. Then comes the idea of social class. Somebody who belongs to the lower class, or somebody who belongs to the middle class, or somebody who belongs to the upper class, the language choices would reflect that. When it comes to English in Pakistan, for example, if somebody frequently uses English in their speech, then, it is very easy to decipher this linguistic identity, to understand that the person, belongs to the elite class of Pakistan. And same is the case with the historical contexts, by certain linguistic choices, we exhibit that as well. I would give you another example, my dear students, of how, linguistic identity operates. So if you take the example of a Yorkshire man telling someone to wait while 5 o'clock, this choice of the word while, instead of using the standard language choice until, because otherwise we say wait until 5 o'clock. But if a Yorkshire man says wait while 5 o'clock, in doing so, this person is showing a particular kind of, regional identity. And he, declares his own local credentials through this choice that he makes. And in fact, when he makes this choice, it is not only showing his own identity, it is also, in a way, allowing the other to belong to him, or not allowing the other to belong to him by showing a particular identity. So, this matter of inclusion or exclusion, this movement towards somebody, being close to somebody, using the same language as the other person uses, for example, or using your particular language choice, keeping the other person at a distance. This is all an issue of, what relates identity with dialects.